Okay, here's what I've been doing for the last month is a complete, essentially, if you're not in the knife community, it is a waste of time, right? I can't call it research. It is more of a waste of time and a little bit of waste of money. But I have went on a quite silly trajectory thinking about button locks and, you know, just whatever, the design and creation and sort of the, I don't know, engineering on a low level engineering side of things. So I will first thank my buddy Tyler, who sent me all these, the Civivi Conspirator, the Kizer Original, the Civivi Altus, and the BRS Apache, the BRS Evolve Apache, something like that. Brand new knife, right? So he sent me all these. This one the Conspirator, he sent me almost a month ago. And it really, again, just launched me into like, wait a minute, there's something here that I can figure out. Backstory is I've never had a button lock. I literally don't care for them. Right? I mean, I don't have a positive thought, a negative thought. I guess a little bit, I always thought they kind of looked ugly. They messed up the front side of this. Now, I give Civivi credit, and you know, the Kizer one here as well, that they at least do a little bit of a divot here to kind of integrate it the best that they can. Even this Apache, you know, gives a little bit of contouring around it. Like, okay, that's a little better. But I just think this is ugly when they stick up that far. The prime example that everybody loved was that the Buttonlock Elementum. I thought they just ruined that knife. I never understood it. It looked terrible that the button stuck up so far. The new Feldspar. The Feldspar looks that way too. Blah, 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 blah. That's my fickleness and nonsense, right? I will say this on a side note. This is probably going to be my longest video. I'm sure I'm going to talk for way too long. My idea here is, again, to splice in multiple videos. I'm going to take these all apart, and I want to compare inside of here. I'm really going to compare these two, but then I wanted to see what it looked like from other companies. So that'll be a portion of the video. I went down, again, I really spent way too much time thinking about springs and compression springs, and I know way too much about compression springs now. I went on this McMaster Car app, and I'm gonna put a video in there about what the app looked like, where I found a different spring from them, so on. Okay, so it'll be several different videos, and I'll try to keep it as short as I can, but by all means, feel free to fast forward as you wish. I do not care one bit about what YouTube statistics and, you know, skipping through and blah, blah, blah. I don't care. So do as you wish. So here's where it's at, right? Never had a button lock. Again, didn't really care for it. But we're in the thick of the craze, are we not? You know, it's quite a bit right now. Every company, Civivi is certainly spearheading this idea around every model has to be a button lock right now. They already have, 4 to 5 models out, and they just keep releasing more and more. It looks like there's 6 more to come. And again, every brand is jumping on this. Button locks are not new by any means, but they are certainly a high trending fad right now. And that's fine. If you love button locks, then boy, rejoice in your era, right? So he gave me this one again about a month ago, and right when I got it, you know, the first thing to do is flip it. And I'm like, oh, that seems to be okay, you know. And then you flick, I'm like, wow, I can really pop that quite easily, you know. And I'm like, wait a minute, it's just, you know, this is very soft. Even clear up here, if I pinch clear up here, you know, it's like, wow, this is very soft and kind of mushy, you know. And so I text Tyler right away, and he had 2 of these. I don't know if I said it or not, but so I texted him. He said, no, yeah, mine feels the same way. He's like, I think that's the way they all are. I'm like, oh. So then, of course, my brain being, I always, at our job, it's mechanical and it's so electric, so we have an electromechanical mind, right? Electronics, mechanical, and we analyze everything. So my brain really kicked into high gear with this. I'm like, oh, so is that the way they all are? Well, you know, people, meaning all button locks, do they all have this amount of travel before it pops out of the socket inside of here? Or is it just this one? Or, you know, I already confirmed from Tyler his felt the same way. So what I did next, I live about an hour north of River's Edge Cutlery, and I went down there and I said, you know, I want to see this and I want to see this. And the guy already knew honestly what I was doing. He's like, oh yeah, the Altus feels drastically different. I'm like, oh, well, that's weird. And I flip it. I'm like, no, wait, he's right. It definitely does. You can even hear it. Now, is it because it's buttonlock? Is it because it's thumb stud? Oh, maybe it is. Is it because it's a smaller blade? Yeah, probably. All those things come into play. But also, I looked at the travel time here is almost nothing. It is soft, but it's better. It's a better detent. But the travel time before it pops out is quite a bit less. And so then I started thinking like, okay, well, what do we have going on here? What is inside of this, right? So I only had this one. What are the inner workings of this? So I went back home and then I really started diving. I took this thing apart and I looked at the spring and looked at the, I'll say socket. There's a conical shape inside of the blade, right? It is the same idea, right? This is a really good detent on this. Same idea that inside of the blade there is, you know, and here there's a real tiny little hole, and the detent ball on the liner lock itself sits inside of that when it's closed. All right, that's the same. Obviously, when it's open, this is a totally different system. But when it's closed, the same idea. It's just a lot bigger, right? On here, on the blade, we have a cup more and sort of a piston inside of here that sits down inside of it. All right, the spring pushes it down, and as we deploy the blade, it actually will move this whole thing, right? It'll draw this down, you can see. So the cup is on this side, okay? The cup and the blade is on the back side. And that would be, is that a difference? Right, no, it's all the same, it's all the same. Okay, so the cup would be on this side, right? So certainly the cup, when you start to deploy it, it will pull the button down. And then as it goes to deploy all the way, you can see on the back side of there. And look, I know I'm not the first one to do this. I'm just going over this so all the information is in one video. So as you do that, and then it pops over, right? It pushes the piston. The little spring is buried. The spring is buried inside of this scale. So it pushes it over. And that works fine. Everything about it is perfectly fine. I'm not arguing that. It locks up nice and solid. It's just this. This really bothered me. So now I felt this, and I thought, well, okay, so what's the difference here? You know, what's Civivi doing? Is it the spring difference? Well, I doubt it. Economically speaking, they're going to cut down on costs as much. So my original thought was same spring, right? It's got to be the same spring from here to here. They're not going to buy different springs with different tensions and kind of mess around with it. So then is it that they would change the shape of the cup that's in here? You know, they actually completely change the degrees, the angles at which it would. Well, again, now they're gonna have to change some sort of jig, some sort of rig. This is just obviously very crude, a step bit, but the idea that this is gonna go down into the blade, would they change the angle? Well, I doubt it. I don't think that they would go that far with it. I would think that the angle, if we're looking at it from a side, the angle as the piston rides up, right? If it's a steeper angle, all right here, because I'm going to tell that later. I already know that. If this is a steeper angle, obviously it's going to be harder to get that blade deployed. You know, if you have a more gradual angle, it's going to come out easier. All right, so those are things I started thinking about. What is the difference between here and here? Of course, the idea that this is thumb stud versus flipper, that's going to make a difference. Larger blade, smaller blade, is that our main difference? All those are going to come into play. The blade thickness would certainly come into play, right? Because if it's a shorter ramp that it has to go up, well, then it will pop out. So our travel time here would be different, correct? You know, we're going to pop out of that. This is just where my brain went, you know, and I started going through all this stuff and dealing with springs and so on. I think that's it. That's enough blabbing around, I believe. This one is brand new. I'll say this, I guess this one's brand new. Oh, I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do as well. And it's getting a lot of flack because it is a stiff. The action when you push the button seems to be okay, but several people have said this is a hard pop to get that thing to come out of there. And the fact that, you know, I can roll this out. If you watch Gary the Last Ranger, he couldn't even deploy his. All right, so I'm curious what we're gonna find in there in this sweet little hologon right here. You know, yeah, I can kind of get this, but I mean, you're really cramming on it. So I'm curious what we're gonna find inside of this one. I already got, again, these are all Tyler's and I don't wanna mess them up. So I did get the okay from him to take this apart. And my idea, you know, there's a heavy stonewash on the blade, and other people have said after it seems to be, you know, a couple, whatever, 100 flips, it's getting easier and easier. So my idea is, well, let's just kind of help that process along. And I'm sure that they did this heavy stonewash all the way around the pivot too. So that cup is probably coated in a bunch of stonewash stuff. It's like, well, what if we just do a real hyper polish on it and clean the shit out of it? All right, that's the truth. So I want to do that. And he said, that's okay. So I'm going to do that. This, you guys are just going to everybody's going to take my word for it that I can very easily pop this thing out, clear up here. All right, my ring finger, my pinky finger, all of these very easily. I've already figured out what spring to put in it. So I'm going to take this apart. We're going to look at the inside of it, and then I'm going to put this spring back in, and we'll come back and kind of talk about it. So I'll put all this stuff back together, and we will sort of recap the discoveries, because something here, right? I just want to do these for a comparison and see what this looks like. I'm curious what the difference is, if there's something physically different inside of here. I have this laying here because I'm going to take this apart too, just so visually we can kind of see what it really is. That when it's closed, it's the same concept, just on a bigger level. I think that's it. I think that's all I got to talk about. Again, video's gonna be long. Feel free to fast forward, and let's dive into the stuff. Okay, so I realized while I'm shooting this, I kind of shot everything out of order. Like I said, I'm just going to spice all this together. I forgot to put in the photo of the spring dimension, so I'll throw that in somewhere when I'm talking about that spring later, so we can kind of see. But going through this, all right, so this is a McMaster Car app, which if you've never done it, this is basically just a parts everything, right? You can dang near get anything. I've worked a few jobs where we used McMaster Car, and they overnight everything. That's their cheapest of like $9 shipping. So, you know, yeah, you pay a few dollars for the part you need, but you get it literally the next day. So it's pretty cool. All right, so we're going to search, and we're looking for compression springs, which I've already done here. You can see I'm just going to click on that, and it's going to bring up the options of everything they have. And whoops, sorry, I'll swipe that down. Compression springs, you have corrosion resistant, which I immediately wanted. Obviously, we're going to put oil in it and whatever else. I don't want to worry about something corroding. So a couple of different options there of corrosion resistance, but I can tell you the second one in, if memory serves me, is the only one that had the correct outer diameter, because the outer diameter is probably the main dimension that we were looking for, because as we already saw, the inside of the Civivi one, the cup was a specific size and the spring fit right inside of it nicely, and I wanted to maintain that, right? So I clicked on the second one here, corrosion resistant compression springs. All right, it's going to bring up all their stuff. This really handy table. The first thing we can do, again, my outer diameter was very specific, right? So I'm going to click the OD column, the very first one, and our outer diameter, if we go back and look at it, the was 0.156. And, you know, I know that I can be somewhat wrong, off minutely, but, you know, I was just using my calipers to get all those measurements, and the best that my eye can see and measure up everything, that's what we came up with. So 0.156. So I'm going to click on that, and it lists us, and you can see there in the bottom, it is 5 products. We're going to swipe this down, and here's our 5 products. Now I'm going to click the table tab up here across the top. If you see, it says category list and table. I'm going to click the table because that's pretty cool. It actually lists everything nicely for me since we only have 5 products we're looking at. So there we go. Outer diameter is first. They're all the same. Inner diameter, I didn't really care too much about. It didn't really matter, right? As much. And so I thought, I guess. Material, stainless steel, so that's fine. Length, who cares, right? I'm going to snip it down to what I need to. Here's the next one that I originally overlooked, and this is where, you know, my wife won't let me regret that I overlooked this column of spring rate, and that is pounds per inch, right? That's the amount of pressure that you need in order to squeeze this thing down. And I really overlooked that. If you can see, there's glaringly obvious that the first one is 26 pounds and all the rest of them are nothing almost. You know, it's like, because my initial thought with all this was I wanted a spring with a thicker wire diameter. And I'm thinking, okay, our wire diameter was 0.018, right? You can see these bottom four are all 0.016. And the top one, I'm like, oh, look at that, 0.028. Well, that much more can't be that big of a difference. However, we go back and wait a minute, it is a huge difference. So my first order, I ordered just the top one and spent the $9. And if we scroll all the way over here, they're $3 a piece, right? So $3 and I'm okay. And I get them and I immediately hold them up. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I can't even squeeze these things. So it was completely wrong, right? So then I went back and I hung my head and said, hon, I ordered the wrong thing. She didn't care about the $13. That's not the point. But, you know, I try to be precise around a lot of things and I skipped that. So I went back anyways and ordered the next three. I didn't bother ordering the bottom one because as you can see, the compression rate, the spring rate is the same, and compressed length is the same there as well. The middle two there change a little bit. So I thought maybe that was going to be it. But I can tell you overall, the winner of what I chose is the second one listed, 2.2 pounds. The wire diameter is the same. Those guys were $6 a piece, or $6 for a bag of, let me say that, $6 for six pack of six, right? So that was the winner. We're going to click on that second one, and it gives you the number right there up next to the price on the left side. In stock, 6 of them, 1986. That was a good year. That was 1986 K1. And then the length, of course, as we can see, it was 1 inch. So I just snipped it down and I just started snipping away because I knew that it had to be longer because when I got those in, it felt remarkably the same. So I just kept snipping it down until I got the right length. And that's honestly a personal thing. I don't think anyone's ever going to go through this anyways. You know, I eventually, because I did 2 orders, I spent like $25 or whatever, which is not that big a deal. But it again, I don't know that anyone's going to bother going through this, but just so you guys kind of see or so everyone sees what I did, and the one that kind of was the winner for me. And I don't have an exact length of what I did. I never bothered measuring it. It just felt right because I literally could get down to where I was snipping one ring off at a time until it felt right. You know what I mean? It's easily twice the length of the original spring. And hopefully you saw that by the video by now anyway. So, all right, everybody. That's enough of this part. Let's get into, oh wait, yeah, because of where I'm going to put this, you haven't seen the spring yet, I don't think. Anyways, whatever, wherever I put this portion of it, you guys will see all of it later. Cool. All right, so I got way too excited and kept talking to myself as I was tearing this all apart because this became much more fascinating. All right, first, this is not mine, as I said, it's Tyler's, and I think he's probably planning on getting rid of this. This will not come out. I don't want to tweak it. I don't want to strip it. I don't want to mess with it. It won't come apart. So the Kizer original is now just off the table because I don't want to mess with it. It's, you know, I use waaaaaay stuff, and it is just wanting to not move. These screws all came out very easily, but that pivot is really giving me some fits, and I don't want to strip it out at all or even take the coating off. As him and I talked about, I think this, you know, aluminum with the powder coating on it, I think is gonna end up giving some really easy pocket wear as is, and I know he's probably gonna want to get rid of that. So here's the thing, in comparison with this, it really was barely different than this. Honestly, the sound was a little different. So I was kind of curious, but you know, I don't know if that's just the aluminum portion of it absorbing some sound. I'm gonna say so, but feeling wise and size wise, it's very, very comparable. And Tyler, I'll link a couple of his videos because he talked a lot about these and their functionality. So Kizer original is off the table, but I thought for sure I would see the exact same thing inside of a lot of these. Over here in the corner, I told you I'd just kind of take apart just for a comparison. I might not even say much about it because everyone I guess knows how a traditional liner lock and or frame lock works, but it's kind of interesting to see because I couldn't honestly put it in my brain until I visually saw what this looks like. But from here to here, so over here, this pile is the Altus, this is the Conspirator, Civivi Conspirator, and up here, I couldn't get it all on one screen, but I'll pick everything up and show you. Maybe I can scoot down just a wee bit. I'll lose my camera falling off the table here, my phone or whatever. Up here in the corner is all of the BRS Apache stuff. Okay, so first thing, right? I took this part and I remember I said, we'll make that the first thing, spring, and I'm right. Okay, I really am. I don't know if there's just the slightest amount of difference. All right, I wouldn't be able to tell it. Can I get it up close enough there? Yeah, there you go. And between these two, this is the one out of the Conspirator. Whoops, we're getting a little magnetized here. Magnet, slow down. All right, this is from the Conspirator, and this is the Altus spring, and I'm telling you, they're the same. You're gonna have to take my word for it on the pressure that it takes to apply to it to squeeze these down, but they feel the exact same, all right? Size-wise, I can tell, you can easily tell that length and the outer diameter of these. I'm gonna put in that video before I put in this portion so you kind of can see what McMaster-Carr does. Oh, there you go, that's even a better thing if you lay them like that. No, come on here. This is hard to do. There, they look like one spring. Okay, so I know that is settled. Same spring. And again, economically, it makes sense. I would assume they would. Okay, now, the angle of the divot in the blade. I don't have anything to measure this by, but let's look at one. I hope this picks this up perfectly. Oh, that black's gonna be kind of hard to see, I think. I'm gonna scratch up anything either. I'm gonna hold these like this. How does that look? I'm gonna do this. Let's try to shine a little light in there. Too bright? This one, maybe? Oops, sorry. I'm trying to figure this out because, oh, yeah, perfect. Look, I hope that shows up exactly right. That the Altus, the Altus, they did not go as deep into the blade. You see that? I hope that's showing exactly the way I think it is. Where the Conspirator, yeah, okay, cool. The Conspirator, they went a lot farther down with the cone, with the divot portion of it, right? Where the Altus, they did not go down as far. There, you can see there's a lot larger lip. So I started thinking like, wait a minute, that actually voids what I thought I was gonna find here. I thought for sure I was gonna find that this was all drilled the same and piloted the same. I'm gonna say, without having a way of really measuring this actual shape here, without actually measuring this angle coming up out of here, they feel the same, but this, what does that mean then? This Altus has less to travel, where the Conspirator, the button sits farther down in the blade. Well, yeah, see, because so that's not going to apply as much pressure. Is that right? Would that be right? See, I wanted to record all this because you guys will help me along too, and maybe we'll have a big conversation. So this sits down on here. Okay, let's think about that. So this button would sit down in here, right? Yeah, so this button would sit down in here, so the pressure, because this button is farther down, now we could, and it sits inside of this cup right there. That's the other side where the button sits, and that would go up against, is that right? That would go up against, oh boy, come on Jake, figure this out. Yes. Go here. This would go here. Sorry, this is just weird to look at it in this fashion, right? So when it's closed, that button, the spring, goes between there and there. So what they've done, they've used the same spring. We're gonna just put that out there, same spring, okay? And because this is farther down, meaning a bigger gap when this is closed, the spring isn't compressed as much, which means there's not as much pressure, so the detent would be weaker. I'll be doggone. I did not think that was going to be what I figured out, or what, someone correct me. I hope Kevin at Knife Nerdery, I love that dude's videos. They are some of the most entertaining. He deep dives so hardcore, and I would love for him to do all this. But that would make sense, right? So then we have a spring that's not... Anyways, Kevin's way smarter than I am and all this stuff, but that would mean that a spring, there's a bigger gap. So this spring is not being compressed as much, meaning it's not putting as much pressure down onto the thing. So again, my idea of putting a bigger spring there is why that feels a little better. I did not expect that. I really didn't. I thought for sure that these would be drilled out the same. Now the other thing is that this opening then, see, I think that opening, what do we think here? That's smaller, right? It's got to be smaller. They didn't drill down as far, but it doesn't mean that looks smaller. They had to make everything smaller because they had more area here, right? They had more area to deal with because of the flipper tab, so everything has to be a little smaller. It really does look smaller, but it's not so much. So then that would actually go against me saying too that the angle coming up out of the cone is differently. It's more the fact that they went down farther. I think the trajectory is the same here. I think the angle is the same. I don't have anything to measure that with. Someone smarter than me can figure that out. All right, so we also have less of a road to travel on here. Yeah, what does that look like? That looks smaller. Look at those divots. It really does look almost... It is. It's just slightly smaller because they went down. So I still think the same thing, that they aren't changing the angle, but because they went down farther on this one. Now, is that a blade stock issue? I mean, these are so close. Yeah. Close enough that it wouldn't matter. I mean, they had the same amount of meat. So then why did they decide to go so much farther down on that? Wow, that's so interesting. Let's look at the BRS. Right, so when we all understand it, right? So this would sit in here. It's the same concept. Buttons are the same, by the way. These are the exact same. That was one thing Tyler talked about too, and I thought that was a good idea as well. Because everything had to be smaller, smaller knife, smaller blade, no flipper tab, if this button was different, but these are the exact same buttons. Okay, same spring, same button, same trajectory. However, the ramp up is actually higher here, but that leaves, that's why you get that greater when you can pull the blade out for a lot farther, right? Because A, the spring is softer because we now have more of a gap. B, the ramp is now longer going up it before it pops out, right? Where this has more pressure. This has greater pressure, and it has a look. You know what I mean? It has such a shorter. Make sure that's on there, right? Has such a shorter distance to travel right there. It pops out almost immediately. So over here, if we did the same thing, we put our spring in. I'm going to use the word identical. It's an identical spring. Someone can correct me, but regardless, same, feels the exact same. But over here, we now have this sitting lower, which means this spring doesn't apply as much pressure, and it's got a longer road, and it should, you would think, so as it comes up, it doesn't get any stiffer than this. There's no more compression, right? So it's here, it's compressed, and it's got a longer path, so you get all that play. Wow, you get a lot more play because that ramp is a bit more. I'll show you one thing before we bring in this BRS, because the BRS is a different beast as well. So here, is the camera pick? Oh yeah, you can pick that up. See how shiny this is? This is one thing I'd mentioned before, that I took this edge and just, what I'm gonna do to that, probably I'll do more on that. But this, I polished this whole edge, you know, just took some scuff pads and just polished it real, and I could go even farther. Because one thing to note is that when you know, initially flip this out, all right, you initially flip this thing out, you release, but then it rides, sorry, on camera, it rides right inside of there. So I actually polished that to just alleviate some issues. All right, when you go to close it, you know, you just kind of give it that shake and you push the button. So when this goes to close, it's in this open position here, and you push it and the blade drops, and then you just let go of the button. Well, then it rides. You see that friction point right there? So it rides right along that edge. So I polished this a whole bunch, even kind of, you know, gave it a little bit of extra glare. And then I also polished underside of this better, not just barely. I just wanted to kind of knock off to see if there were any ridges, but you could really polish the inside of this too, this area right here, and get a better idea. So the BRS, okay, BRS, first of all, the spring feels drastically, now that's a steep word. Drastically is not the right word. I'll make sure I don't mix these up. Okay, lengthwise, it is actually shorter. Gosh, these things are, sorry, they're sticking together too much. So here's our Civivi spring. Whoops, let me come up here. Here's our Civivi spring, this side. And then this side is the BRS spring. So you can see, if you can tell or not, but it is shorter just by a few rings. But it's quite a bit more stiff. All right, so we're getting, again, put this back here so I don't lose it. Same concept. Here's our giant button. Look at the difference in the button. This is the button for the BRS. Look how big that thing is. Look how big and beefy that is. And then look at the Civivi button. Isn't that funny? Just the little differences, you know, put it the right way. So this is the cup side, everything. Everything is so different. Look how much bigger that is. All right. So this is the button for it. And it would sit just like this, same concept. Right? That's the right way? Yeah, no, the other way was the right way. You push it to get rid of it. Right. So this would sit just like this. And it is a little weird because it doesn't even sit in there. Yeah. It doesn't sit in there real well. You know? So they really rely on, well, that's funny. See, I started getting too involved in all this before I was recording. That's another reason. This doesn't sit in there as nicely as the Civivis do. Same concept though. I mean, we have, we have our spring that puts pressure down here. This is weird too because look how much bigger that is. Look, you could get a drastically fatter spring in there. Tyler uses this this really cool grease. He's talked about it before. It's like an electronics grease to prevent gulling. Gulling, whatever. Anyways, he tried some of that on there to help some of this out too. You know, just metal rubbing on metal, it would do that. But it would help prevent that, is what I'm trying to say. So we have a bit bigger here. You see how much bigger the cup is than the spring, even over here. I'll clean that all up, but see how much bigger that is? That's weird. It's almost like they were prepping for something much larger. But there's the spring. The spring's in. Again, very interesting that this does not fit in here very well at all. And this is, you know, about the same price point, but you can see how much of a gap there is on this side of it. And it doesn't sit down in there quite flush. But comparing And I'll do this one because we can see it a little bit. The angle, I'll lay them like this. All right, comparing the angle here coming out of that divot versus A, how shallow, and B, how steep that is, right? Because that's what we're looking at. We're going to think about the way this knife is again. Be like this. Your button gets pressed in. It's closed. Let's see, when it's closed, it's like this. And we have a bunch of pressure pushing this way, right? We put this together. We have a bunch of pressure pushing this way, and it pops out. So our concern, you know, is this side of it right here. So that's even more interesting to me that this does not really fit in there very well at all. It doesn't seat flush in there. Oh, there you go. Look at it that way. Let me bring my flashlight back out. Okay. See if that shows up? Yeah. See, it doesn't really sit in there very flush at all. I mean, I know I'm moving it around a bit, but I think what they... Yeah. See, it's a bit rounded on the bottom side of it there. I know somebody's going to point out my fingernails. Sorry, look, that's just what my fingernails are. Yeah, it's kind of like the hockey cup. What's oh, I completely forgot it. Sorry, I'm not into hockey. Looks kind of like the hockey cup on the bottom. So they just relied on it not sitting quite so flush in there and just made this a bit more rounded, where this doesn't have to be near as round. There's a slight angle on the bottom, but compared to this, it's a lot more rounded on the bottom of it. So you have where they kind of took the idea of making this a little more rounded, and these are so steep, maybe a little quality control why that doesn't sit nicely in there. Which if they got a little quality control issue, maybe that would explain why some people have so much more of an issue with this blade popping out of there, right? Because this thing's closed, we apply pressure, it pops out and rides along there. So, oh, that's even really stiff. Going around this. See, that's the type of stuff. I want to clean that up because I think this has some pretty good potential. This BRS, it's a little too small. I still don't understand why they made it so small, because the original Apache was about an inch longer than that. And it was, you know, it was a frame lock and it was really cool and expensive. But regardless, it was a really cool knife. So why not keep it the same size? So anyways, I think that covers it. Like I said, I'm going to splice in the video. This will probably be more towards it. I'm going to splice in the video where I talk about this and the McMaster car stuff. I tried several different springs. All right. And I can just show you, again, I went down a rabbit hole. This was the spring from McMaster car, and I will highlight that in the video that I talk about. That's the number on McMaster car, if you really feel like it. But on top of it, they only come in 1-inch marks, and we're talking, I'll have shown the dimensions, but, you know, this is all the longer spring. But, where'd I put it? The end result of the spring, oh, here it is, sorry. The end result, just to show you what I'm going to put back in here because I think it feels better. All right, this is what's going back into the Conspirator, just because I've already done it and I don't want to mess with any of this other stuff. And then I'll probably send all this back to Tyler and I'll send him both these springs and see what he wants to do with it or whatever. But you can see the difference, okay? The difference here being this is, I know I've already shown all this stuff, but so I guess remember, this was slightly thinner in the wire diameter. The outer diameter is the exact same. So the only thing I could do then was add, you know, length in order to get a little more compression. Now looking at the difference in these, all of that really makes sense to me. So there, I'm going to put that over here and keep that guy. That's the factory spring. It still is cool to me though that we can just change a spring out and suddenly the knife changes. Again, not drastically, but just a little different. Over here, I'm going to polish the heck out of this. I really want to polish all this up a lot, you know, because that's a pretty hefty edge. Not grind it. I don't want to grind it. I don't want to change it. But if I can just even ease over these edges just a wee bit. This is already as shiny as it's going to be, but I want to polish all of this just like I did that one, and polish inside of here. I'm curious how it'll turn out. So, all right, that's the end of this portion. This is going to be a super long video. I keep saying it, I know, but I'll come back with all this put back together maybe another day. And we understand this. This is how it works. It pops apart. That just gives us an idea, right? Just to go over this again. So this would be the very large version of a detent ball, would be that end of it. Detent ball pushes down into a small point on here, that hole, versus a big cup on the blade. So it's pretty cool engineering-wise, and just thinking about it, it's pretty cool. Very shocked and very happy to see that. That's sucks over here. I don't know what else to say. That sucks. I don't know what was behind why they made that so drastically different. Again, I stand behind the fact that I think it's the same angle, but this has such a longer ramp to go up, where this is a shorter ramp, but a lot more pressure, and it doesn't have as far to go. Even if the angles are the same, it's only popping out here, where that has all this way to go up here, and it's a softer, there's not as much compression. So, okay, very cool. Yeah, okay. So let's recap. I've had a day now to think about all this. I recorded the other two at the beginning and then taking apart, or whatever, the interior of this. So I put it back together. I changed what I said I was going to in both of these. So this now has the spring from McMaster car, which I'm going to put the video talk. I'm going to do a screen recording. And again, I'm going to probably apologize in that portion of it. I haven't done it yet, but it's going to be, right from my phone. So it'll be long and skinny, but I want everybody to see what it kind of looks like. And then the idea of why I picked the springs, and by me, if anyone is also happens to be a knife nerd and also a spring nerd, please, you'll find a different one and exactly jump on that. Maybe you work for a spring factory, or I don't know, whatever that looks like, right? So do your best in the comments and tell me, no, you should have done this one or whatever, because just me fuddling around with this really is on my own, and I know more about springs than when I need to. I can tell you that much. So anyways, we're all back together here. I put the spring in this, we'll talk about this one, right? This is now the spring from McMaster car. And again, I don't have a way to measure the tension. We already know that this travel is going to probably be the same if I pinch it way down here. There's just more pressure now for it to, make it up that hill as it tries to climb up the hill now. Inside of here, there's just more pressure. That's just the physics of it now. So I can tell you it now has more pressure. That's all there is to it. There's more pressure putting it down, and it feels it. There's a difference. I'm happy with this as far as where I would leave it. And I'm going to leave this spring in it when I send all these back to Tyler. So yeah, I am going to, they're his. And all of this, again, research, wasted time for anybody that cares, I've concluded that I still don't. I don't like Buttonlocks, right? I really just didn't have an opinion about them. I just don't like them. And I know there's a whole nother level of these with assisted ones, which I don't care for assisted knives. And, the ProTech Malibu has been brought up to me a couple of times. And I'm sure it's great, okay? But, it's just on a personal level, that's not a knife I'm going to buy. It's not, financially, that's where I don't spend, my money. And so I'm sure it is fantastic, but I primarily purchase, in the $100 range. I've got some that are in the $250s, but I don't use them. I have a hard time. This is a total side tangent, right? But it's just personal. What I do every day is basically cut tape and cut cardboard. So I don't need anything in that price range. So I'm never gonna experience the Malibu because it doesn't really matter. I'm sure it's a fine knife. I really am. If you love the Malibu, please, I'm glad that you love the Malibu. I think I said Malibu, which is a little silly. But anyways, so I'm sure it's pretty fine. But just speaking of all of this big budget button lock craze, that's where my brain was kind of stuck in. So putting this spring in here, is anyone going to spend the money to put a spring in to make it a little snappier? I doubt it, because it's still not this, and it's never going to be that. We've discovered that now. There is a much larger divot and a much larger ramp, right? That's really what it boils down to, as far as what I can see. Somebody chime in. I hope there's comments on this anyways, and we can further discuss. But now, I mean, I can tell you, I have to apply more pressure to get it out of there. It's not great. Is it as good as this? No, probably not. I think this is still probably a little better. So I'm gonna send this back to Tyler with this other spring in there, and then he can have the factory spring as well. So there's that. Okay, I was quite fascinated with the idea of what they did, you know, and again, thinking about it after a day or whatever, it's the fact, right? They had more room here, so that plunge with whatever, just generic step bic, whatever they used in the factory, they just had more room, so they just took it down farther, right? Which your angle doesn't change, it just goes that it's wider now. So overall, then you have now the spring has deeper, so it's not compressed. It's not compressed as much, and because we went wider, this makes this farther up, right? Because the floor now has dropped drastically. So less compression and a farther travel time for that piston to pop up and out of. Here, the spring is compressed more, and the travel up the road, the same exact angle, is less, so it pops out quicker. So now we have a snappier little action. Having said all that, okay, look, you can turn these all upside down and give them the old, quick shake. Every one of them will do that, minus this, and we'll talk about that. These three, I guess I shouldn't say every one of them, right? Because that excludes that. All of these can have a quick shake out, and it's like, I just think that's probably the design of these budget button locks, okay? Is that something wrong or bad? I don't know, that's up to you. I don't have a thumb stud version up here, but I've had liner locks that have weak enough detent when, something's in my pocket and keys and so on, and I lean over and then the keys pop it out. And I mean, that literally happens. I've cut myself once, but I've had this as an issue. It was the Civivi pintail. That's exactly what it was. Then when I go to try to pull it out of my pocket, it catches on the inside, you know what I mean? And so I imagine these would do that too. I don't know that, but I've carried this enough. It would have to be a bit more, somehow the keys would have to do this or whatever, but I don't know. Anyways, that's what it is, okay? Make up your own mind there, whether you think that's worth it or that's gonna happen or not. Okay, so this guy. Here's the thing, right? I said I was gonna do like a hyper polish inside of here to get rid of the stone wash, and possibly on that cup to maybe it would round the edges a little bit. I used just 3M scour pads. I have different levels. There's, I think, multiple of them, but the ones I have are white, which is like a very, very fine or whatever, and then there's maroon, which is very fine, and then gray, I think, which is, the most stiff or whatever. I just scrubbed it down with that. That's it. I'm not removing metal, all right? I'm not sanding, and I'm not doing anything. And it was just by hand, so I literally just twisted inside of here a whole bunch to remove all this, and yeah, it probably rounded a little bit. This knife sucks. All right, if you like it, you like it, and that's fine. I love the looks of this, but I think they completely screwed up on either the quality control or just the design. I don't know. Small knives are fine, but the original version of this is about an inch longer, and it's like $160, and it's a frame lock and looks cool, and I don't understand any of this. I don't understand the structure. I don't know, as you've seen in the video, why this piston doesn't fit in this cup very well. I think that's a quality control issue. Why is it so massive? I don't know. Taking this apart, putting it back together is really infuriating. And I imagine, if I wanted to take this apart, I don't think I said this already. I'm sorry. I recorded this ending a few different times. You've seen in the video, I couldn't take this apart. I called Tyler. Sorry to put this aside. I don't want to forget to say this. I had talked to Tyler, and he said, yeah, this kept backing out. So he put a big glop of Loctite in there, which is fine. I just didn't want it. You can feel that like, was it going to strip or not? It probably would have popped. He okayed me to go ahead and use a solder iron and heat it up, pull it out. I'm not doing any of that. I don't think this and this are so close, so similar. I doubt I'm going to see anything really enlightening if I were to bother taking this apart. And again, I know he's probably going to trade these or sell them, so I don't want to mess it up. So it's just going to sit there. That's fine. Okay. Now, but this would have had the same angerment that this does. Why, on what would be considered the show side, would they put the screw? The screw head, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I get this is nitpicky, but really, the show side, right? We have the show side of the pivot and a button lock there next to it. So when we flip it over, oh, okay, here's the, I call this the workable side. Whenever I'm working on any knife, that's what I do. I look at, this is the show side, this is the workable side. So I lay it down so that it's not engaged, the lock isn't engaged, so there's no pressure. So I can just take these screws off, pull this off, it comes apart super easy, done, right? I don't even have to pick the thing up. It's very easy to maintain. These are that way. I can just lay it this way, open up the blade so there's no pressure on anything, take it off, take it off. Now this of course has a spring, raise this up slowly, take the spring out, you're done. All right, I'm gonna move this aside because again, I didn't really mess with it. This is infuriating. You have to take this side of this off so the spring is pushing against everything that you don't want it to, all the moving parts. You've seen in there, again, is it a quality control issue? I don't know. Why is this cup so big and the spring is so tiny that it wants to move all around? Even on the cutout over here, this portion, it's so massive and that spring is wanting to, oh my gosh, it's just wanting to flop all around. It was, it came apart when I took it apart, it just sort of, everything just sort of popped. I'm like, oh, okay. And so putting it back together was really annoying compared to this. I'm not saying overall this is the most annoying knife ever. I'm just saying they understood, right? They understood the assignment. This guy over here, not so much. I don't get why I would call this the show side. Why wouldn't they put the show side, this neat little pattern right here? Flip this whole thing around so I can go to the, again, workable side. I could have taken this off, and then it would have been a lot easier, but whatever. I think this knife is a mess. It is absolutely a mess. Here's the thing. I said I was going to hyper clean it. I did that. All right. I took those scouring pads. I literally just twist them in there. Is the action better? That's the question. Yeah, it is. All right. We basically just did a little bit of, we just fast time lapsed or whatever, fast forward the break in a period around this a bit. It's still not great. I can, just slow roll it with this little hologon thing, which is cool. I think this knife looks neat, but there's too many flaws with it. So I can do that now. And can I flip it? Yeah, I can flip it before. It's a little easier now to do all that. I can even, it's not fun, it's not enjoyable. I can kind of get that right and do the rear finger flick. So if you want to keep this knife, I would suggest doing all that. Just cleaning it out really well, give it a nice polish, put a little oil in there and call it a day. However, doing that, I couldn't believe this. I called Tyler and talked to him about all this stuff already last night. I told you he said about this, but I said, listen, look at this. And I sent him a video after just cleaning it. Okay, remember, I'm not removing metal. I'm not sanding it. It's just buffing it. So yeah, okay, maybe the most minuscule amount of metal. But look what it does now. Make sure this pops up, yeah. See that? Now I got this little play in the blade, and I don't know if it's because this just doesn't want to sit right. Did I really remove enough of the coating that now it sort of frees it up? It's not terrible, but you can feel it. You can't hear anything, but I can feel it when I just kind of wiggle this back and forth like this. I can feel that blade just sort of toggling around in there. So, yeah, I don't know. My overall opinion is don't waste your money on this knife. There are much better options, even though it's only 55 bucks. I just don't care for it. So, final conclusion here. We talked about the spring going in here. This is all going to go back to Tyler, and he can do what he wants with it. I just want him to feel a little bit different. Again, not great, but better. it was a nice discovery. It was a fun discovery to see what they did here, why these are different. And again, certainly, yes, the thumb studs will come into play, and blade shape and blade weight and size and so on, but largely different that really they just plunged farther into this, creating a few different issues where it's not as far here. I'm going to say this is probably very comparable to this one, and this one's a turd. So overall, does anyone care about any of this? Probably not. It was fun for me to, put my, I don't want to say skills, but my brain to farther use than whatever it needed to be, is dealing with knives, right? Because I mean, I even handed this, to my dad, who is even further into, figuring things out and dissecting things. And he just was opening it up and he's looking at me like I'm a fool. And I said, but no, Dad, look, it's this, it's this. And he still didn't care. So anyways, that's quite long enough. If you hung out this far and are as big into these sides, these kind of engineering sides, very cool. All right, leave some comments and let's have a discussion. All right, everybody, take care.